So I recently read and watched Jaws for the first time. I read it first and then watched it. I have actually managed to go this long without any spoilers about the movie. I always just understood the general gist of it as a Moby Dick adaptation and never found myself interested in it or having an opportunity to experience it until now. I was thinking about its cultural significance this summer when I saw 4th of July Jaws shirts for sale. So I read it, and I watched it, and I reread it, and I'm going to watch it again after I upload this to celebrate. I loved the movie, but it is its own masterpiece. I wish so badly that another adaptation would be written and made that reflects the novel. I have such vivid scenes in my head while reading. I have imagined how all it could go to the point that's kept me up at night. CGI is so advanced now that it could easily be made with a combination of real effects and CGI. It would look amazing. Make so much more money. I want so badly for a movie of the book to be made. A healthy warning for those like me who avoid spoilers. I am going to be talking in depth about the movie and the book from here on out. The plot of the movie Jaws, which premiered in 1975, is that a great white shark makes its presence known in the waters of Amity Island through multiple attacks that result in grisly fatalities. Women and children first, elderly and masculine last. The death of a young boy results in a bounty on the shark being advertised. The police chief of the island, Brody, teams up with a skilled oceanographer, Hooper, and the captain, Quint, to hunt the shark and save 4th of July. Rest in peace, the old sea dog. It is extremely different than the book. Not saying I disliked the movie at all. It was shot well. There's memorable lines. The shark puppet was super cute, but that was a different Jaws than what I first experienced. And I kind of understand now what people might mean when they want a movie or series to line up visually with the work. Although several iterations were proposed by the author of the book, ultimately it was asked that most of the intricacies be cut out. I had no idea that the movie was actually based on a book until now, and now the book is definitely one of my favorites. The plot of the book is that when people begin to be attacked by a killer shark, word gets out and news crews flood in. Debates and threats transpire over whether or not the beaches should be closed. Giving the shark an open feeding pool so as not to cause a panic outweighs the option of closing the area off to let the shark swim away until word comes out regarding the cover-up of the little boy's attack. Matt Hooper, an oceanographer and distant friend of Brody's wife, Ellen, is invited to Amity Island. While he's there to provide his skills, a dinner party culminates in the explosion of awkward tension that has been significant between Brody and Ellen. And the next day, Ellen instigates an affair between herself and Hooper. After they're intimate, Hooper dies during the attempt to find the shark. Brody and Captain Quint team up to ultimately take down the shark at the final expense of the captain. Brody returns to the shore alone, forever changed. Now I'd like to do a compare-contrast. There were very few scenes in the movie that I felt were truly inspired by the book. Again, we're not saying these things like they're bad, just true. The book was written as Peter Benchley's first novel. It was a work influenced by a personal lifetime of his own experiences, not a shallow, threadbare tale he was young and lucky enough to tie together with other people's experiences and thoughts. It touched on socially emotional issues that were extremely relevant then and are just as relevant now because they never got fixed. In fact, they were exacerbated and diminished by the themes in media around that time that glorified the idea of a thoughtfully masculine hero, exactly what the book criticizes. The movie lost so many of the themes in the book that the two are just very different pieces of media. The first scene is our first example of that. In the movie, sexuality is used as a narrative tool to refer to status and modesty. The young couple breaks away from the bonfire to skinny dip impulsively, both heavily under the influence. The boy ends up passing out on the beach before even getting into the water, while the girl becomes the first attack victim. Right away, the police are on the scene and the body is uncovered. In the book, I believe sexuality is used as a tool to describe fear. Positive sexual experiences are mentioned in the book, but not lingered on or over-described. The young couple are by themselves on the beach, having an intimate moment, and the woman invites the man to skinny dip the ocean. He declines, but says he'll watch her enjoy herself, falling asleep on the beach. I think that there's a lot more subtlety in the book than there is in the movie. I think the movie was made into more of an action film because that was popular in the 70s. I think today, if there was a direct from source film version of Jaws, it would be just as massively successful because the audience of today is so thirsty for that type of emotional realism. realism. This is not only apparent in tangible and emotionally connective moments in the book, but in the way the shark is described throughout. The shark attacks are near silent and barely witnessed. Once the woman is in the water, she is casually swimming. The author describes the shark in a clinical and menacing tone. Everything comes down to biology. To me, the book is more tense and scary than the movie was. Let me read you an excerpt from the first shark attack. The fish smelled her now, and the vibrations, erratic and sharp, signaled distress. The fish began to circle close to the surface. Its dorsal fin broke water, and its tail, thrashing back and forth, cut the glassy surface with a hiss. A series of tremors shook its body. For the first time, the woman felt fear, though she did not know why. To me, the solitary and predatory nature of this shark is made very clear. I will delve more into this particular thought further in this video, so for now, I'd like you to stay with me in this thought. In the movie, they were faced with a particular dilemma of using subtlety to create tension around the shark's presence, but they also spent crazy money building the damn shark puppet, so they were gonna use it for sure. I think in that movie, it was successful. Let me put it to you this way as to why I find the book's attempt at creating tension very effective. Movies that are more action-based use exaggerated representation of emotion to convey drama. During the first attack in the movie, the victim throws herself around hollering, thinks she's safe, and then is finally pulled under for good. In the book, her death happens in the matter of seconds. She wasn't special, she wasn't toyed with or fed a monologue, never came to eye with her attacker. Her date was asleep, and when he woke up to see her missing, assumes at first she may have simply left and gets a little annoyed. So while we want the world to reflect our desperation and drama when we feel it, on the outside looking in, who can tell what's going on? In the movie, it goes from the first attack to finding the body very quickly. In the book, there's more of a focus on how something like this would unfold in real life, while the movie is more about telling a hero's tale. In the movie, things happen dramatically, and the pacing compared to the book is sped up considerably. In the book, we see that the missing persons report goes to Hendricks, not right to the police chief. In fact, the people searching for the drowned woman are told by Officer Hendricks that just because she's missing from your place doesn't mean she's gone. She might just not want to be there. Chief Brody makes a house visit to the concerned parties and is wholly skeptical of it all until they find the woman's body. Then he is informed by the coroner that a shark attack is the only thing that makes any sense unless they can procure any other reason. Brody insists he is sure there is a shark to blame, not another human. Now, while in both medias the idea of closing the beaches remains congruent, the sequence of events differ. The mayor does insist upon the beaches staying open, and the mayor in the movie is still depicted as slightly corrupt, yet bumbling and concerned about the image of the town, where he changes narratives at will to suit his political self-preservation. The differences occur with the deeper motivations in the book. The economy of the town is focused on as a theme, directly affecting the decisions of the characters. The mayor is motivated by darker intentions. I'll read another passage from the book. Look, Martin, this town doesn't need that kind of publicity. It doesn't need any more people getting killed, either. Nobody else is going to get killed, for God's sake. All you'd be doing by closing the beaches is inviting a lot of reporters to come snooping around where they don't have any business. So, they'd come out here, and when they didn't find anything worth reporting, they'd go home again. I don't imagine the New York Times has much interest in covering a lodge picnic or garden club supper. We just don't need it. Suppose they did find something. There'd be a big to-do that couldn't do anybody any good. Like what, Larry? What could they find out? I don't have anything to hide. Do you? No, of course not. I was just thinking about maybe the rapes, something unsavory. Crap, said Brody. That's all past history. Damn it, Martin! Vaughn paused for a moment, struggling to calm himself. Look, if you won't listen to reason, will you listen to me as a friend? I'm under a lot of pressure from my partners. Something like this could be very bad for us. Brody laughed. That's the first time I've heard you admit you had partners, Larry. I thought you ran that shop like an emperor. Vaughn was embarrassed, as if he felt he had said too much. Over the course of the novel, the mayor and his affiliates resort to increasingly drastic measures to keep Chief Brody from doing his job. It begins with the threat over Brody's job. The mayor shows up to Brody's office personally to apply the pressure. He mentions the fact that he has partners whom Mayor Larry Vaughn is desperate to keep satisfied, more desperate than he is to maintain a sensible attitude about the safety of the island's residents. The mayor pulls out an actual document saying he has the right to remove Brody from his position and he's willing to lie about why. He says the woman who was attacked and killed by the shark was a nobody who wouldn't be missed. Once Brody is home directly after this incident, Ellen tells him about a call he missed from an unnamed man, simply telling him that he's doing a terrific job. These partners that are being referred to are the mafia. The mayor is in debt to them and relies on the success of the tourism of Amity Island to keep his debts managed. The unintended yet obvious consequence is that because the beaches are kept open, a young boy is snatched up by the shark. Contrary to the scene in the movie, the book describes that area of beaches populated sparsely, with a few people on one side of the beach and much less on another side. In the middle are the boy, his mother, and a different family consisting of a father and his young child. The boy insists he's bored and argues with his mother on what he's allowed to do. They decide he can float the water in his raft. Again, the way the shark attacks are described in this book is fear personified. The boy gets bitten and devoured without knowing a single thing that happened beyond a momentary feeling of the wind being knocked out of him. Another silent attack, even with witnesses awake and sober, still seems just as if an unlucky wave swallowed him, with a dark shape the only sign of something more. Immediately after the boy is killed, Officer Hendricks witnesses the shark attack and eat an old man. Again, because there's never a bounty in the book, the news is more involved, and the motivations for the cover-up are entirely different. This is a huge area where the movie's plot is independent from the source material. At this point in the movie, it becomes all about the voyage and the ocean. From here on in the book, things get very deep and dramatic. Once it's found out that the first attack was covered up, Brody vows to stick to his guns and takes personal responsibility for the death of the little boy. He becomes upset with himself for giving in to the demands of the mayor and holding his position above the lives he's sworn to protect. Yet, he reserves a considerable amount of pity for himself, especially when proof of his self-implementation is written in 2 major newspapers. The only thing Brody is remotely heroic about in this version of Jaws is his sense of honesty. Even then, it's in a reactionary and self-congratulatory way, which becomes more apparent with how he interacts with his wife, Ellen. He lusts after younger women and only stops himself when he thinks about how it might make him feel that Ellen is probably doing the same thing to younger men. While the movie contributes to the idea that women are useless in Hollywood, in the book, Ellen Brody plays a very important part. While Brody's movie counterpart is extremely generous, the book describes him as resembling more of first season Stranger Things Hopper. Ellen is described as being 5 years his junior, mid-30s to his early 40s. She has birthed 3 children for him, has kept herself in shape, and embodies what some people would refer to as a trad wife. I see their relationship as equivalent to the Carmelas and Tonys of the world, to the Bettys and Don Drapers, where if someone asked them in perhaps an interview for the New York Times, "How do you do it?" their husbands would answer for them, "Because I told her to, of course." The author makes such specific use of his details regarding sex and relationships that it's very clear to me that he describes the Brody partnership as tense, passive-aggressive, and abusive at times. He treats her as an afterthought. He forgets things she tells him as if it were months ago. On multiple occasions, when she will have prepared a meal for Brody, he turns his nose in disgust. He makes himself a sad bologna sandwich to eat. He criticizes almost everything she makes, and it all almost comes off in a playful and teasing way. Ellen even takes it that way. But then the real anger and resentment underneath is so easily pulled to the surface. Hooper's role in the book is significantly different as well. Hooper is depicted as 10 years younger than Ellen, and they're connected through class in a way Brody has never been able to, something he actively resents. While Hooper's motivation for coming to the island remains the same in the book and movie, his actions are completely different. Hooper is described as more of the Fred Jones ascot-wearing type than the stout sidekick type depicted in the movie. Is he compensating for something? Yes, but not not what you might think. Is he gay? No, but while you're wondering, he'll bone your girlfriend because he doesn't stress her out, which is exactly what happens. The Brodys host an extremely stressful dinner party that reveals just unhappy Ellen truly is. Hooper, at this point in the story, is settled on the island to aid in tracking down the behemoth shark. He and Ellen saw each other at the store, and she invited him to a dinner party she had planned. She prepares gazpacho soup, and Brody complains. He remains antagonistic and stressed throughout, upset that his wife yearns for her past, yet acknowledges it as something he took from her, while Hooper gifts her a shark tooth necklace and entertains the rest with fun stories. Brody overdrinks and insists his own work stories would put everyone to sleep. Very insecure. Ultimately, after everybody else has enjoyed and complimented Ellen's gazpacho, Brody offers to help cut the lamb. He criticizes this as well, insisting it's raw, and when she had actually made the effort to cook it in a specific style. He yells at her to do it herself, and feels good about himself for that. After the guests leave, he literally and genuinely goes, "I think that went well." And she goes, "You must be joking. You were horrible the entire time." He is in such denial that he doesn't understand what she's talking about, then believes it must just be because he blew up over the lamb. The next day, Ellen makes a purposeful lunch date with Hooper. They meet, and the conversation turns sexual in nature. They sleep together. Again, the way the author chooses to use detail strikes me as very intentional. There isn't any graphic detail of intimate relations between couples, but the details that are included describe very intricate emotional workings that influence and carry the entire plot. In the movie, this entire affair is cut out and is purely represented in the single scene where Hooper asks if Brody is going to finish his lunch and takes it. Brody stares at him in silent judgment. Ellen acts shocked and a little impressed. The rest of all of that is cut out, and it alters the rest of the movie plot. The book is set in 3 parts. While in the movie, the majority of it takes place in the ocean, the hunt for the shark itself is only in the last third of the book. This is where we interact the most with Captain Quint. In the book, the bounty never happens. News reporters circulate the story of a killer shark immediately after the boy was attacked, and it reaches very far. One scene altered from the book to the movie was one I had actually expected to see because it was so tense. A group of teens are daring each other to go into the water, and a news team on the beach encourages it for the story. The kid is almost attacked by the shark, barely escaping with his life. In the movie, this scene is changed to when everybody is nervous on the beach, not going into the water until someone finally does. In the movie, it's one of the Brody children that avoids an attack, which claims another man. So after the affair, Brody and Hooper are introduced to Captain Quint. They find him in the phone book and hire him to hunt the shark. He tells them he will need extra hands. This leads into the 3rd part of the book, which mainly takes place on the ocean. At this point, Brody is suspicious of what could have gone on between them. He knows he will use their time together on the boat to at some point confront Hooper. The relationship depicted between the 3 men when they're out to sea has its own similarities and differences. While in the movie they are depicted, in my opinion, as very shallow fragments of a Hollywood fantasy that this movie undoubtedly helped facilitate. We're left with some memorable one-liners. We have also been left with the superficial idea of how a man acts. The men feel stagnant and unaffected, whereas in the novel, the cause and effect of these men's actions is the entire story. I really wonder where the state of masculinity would be now if the messages of this story were taken more to heart at the time. The scenes that occur in the book once the men are on the boat that have nothing to do with the men themselves or relationships are very poignant in their own ways. Instead of drunken pee-pee measuring, there is an important message regarding the natural economy, conservation of nature versus nature itself, of the idea of human significance. Before their journey gets too in-depth, Quint introduces them to what's known as a feeding frenzy. This scene by itself is insanely deep and serves as a story within the story that gives the same message as the overall novel, like in Watchmen or the Bible. Quint also reveals he has a special kind of bait he procured to lure the behemoth shark, which Hooper states emphatically he is morally objected to using. But in practice, when the opportunity actually arises, he is the first one to beg Quint to drop the bait, literally saying he doesn't care. He just wants to see the shark. An opportunity arises for Brody to confront Hooper about the affair. Hooper all but admits it in a moment of frustration, and Brody is set off. Brody is brought to tears as he questions Hooper, strangling him until the man nearly passes out. Hooper lies and says it never happened, and Brody believes him because he's scared of what accepting the truth means. Shortly after their altercation, altercation, they set out to sea. Hooper wants to get in the shark cage to take pictures. Despite multiple attempts by Brody and Quint to convince him otherwise, Quint ends up allowing it. Hooper is attacked by the shark and killed. In the movie, he survives and is able to hide, which of course is a result of the character's depth and role changing. Quint and Brody head back to the shore and come back the next day united, determined, angry. Quint harpoons the shark multiple times, weakening it, but ultimately getting pulled into the sea by the ropes attaching him to the shark, drowning. The shark is face to face with Brody much as it was face to face with Hooper, but by miracle, or by fate, the shark dies of exhaustion and blood loss before Brody is eaten. Of course, this differs entirely from the movie, where Quint is eaten by the shark, Brody blows up the shark, and he makes it back to shore with Hooper. Overall, I found the themes in the movie to be essentially shallow, where the character of Brody is turned into a silent and humble hero, not relatable to the average man, but speaking to their inner desires of how they wish they could come across, or how they think they do. The character of Hooper is changed from an opportunistic young braggart to a respectful yet prideful equal. Quint is changed from being reserved and worldly to a different type of opportunistic braggart, acting as Hooper's foil in both versions of media. Now that we've completed the compare and contrast, I'm going to tell you my interpretation of the themes in the novel and what I interpreted the message of the book to be. The theme of economy drives the actions and consequences of the characters in the book. The exact logic for closing the beach ends up being the logic that should have been used for why the beaches should have been closed. Yet, because of the media attention bringing in curious cats, the bigwigs are still able to cash out regardless. The original girl who was killed was written off as a transient. No one cared enough about her to seek any answers or justice. The decision to cover her death up stemmed from these factors: bad publicity, fear of a different cover-up being exposed, pressure from the mayor's partners. Because the mayor acts out of fear and pressure upon to those whose work revolves around using fear and pressure as weapons, he effectively sets the stage for every consequence that happens. It's revealed in the novel that in the 50s, the mayor borrowed money from the mafia in order to help pay for his wife's treatment. It turns out that the mayor is working with a known mafia family and is conjuring up a scam. He bought up a bunch of real estate at a low price and will essentially be screwed over financially if he's not able to flip any of the properties for a higher price. If the shark keeps attacking people, then the prices will keep falling, leaving him at a loss and potentially in even more debt than he started out with. The town gains tourism revenue through the publicity they're receiving. They're still struggling. The 4th of July approaching constitutes a meeting with the town's representatives. Brody remains the only one insistent that the beach is closed down. Holding his job over his head doesn't work even in the faces of multiple men against him. The only thing that convinces him to keep the beaches open otherwise is the reality that nobody will bow and automatically respect him if he wins. He didn't put his foot down when he could, so now he has to go with what he's helped create and find control over the circumstance. He tells the mayor that he will leave the beaches open but have patrols ready, which the mayor objects to, begging him to be subtle. When Brody gets home, he finds his son and wife sobbing and distraught. One of the mayor's associates had stopped at the Brody's family home, took the family cat, and twisted its neck in front of the child, warning him, "Tell your old man to be subtle." Ultimately, the mayor flees the island with his wife, who still remains ignorant to the entire situation. By this point, he is a shell of his former self. He has been hitting the booze hard, piling the stress and hopelessness of his situation onto his and everyone else's shoulders. It's fair to assume that because his debt to the mafia began before he ever became mayor, that he only became mayor because of his debt to the mafia. This circles back to the initial cover-up briefly mentioned towards the beginning of the book, the rapes. They were blamed on a black man, but the victims never gave statements to the police. Was it these sad housewives' consensual fantasy like Hooper and Ellen suggested coyly? Was it a black man at all, someone usually accused unjustly of these crimes? Did it even happen? The mayor was scared that the shark attacks would reveal his other cover-ups, his ties to the mafia, if shutting down the beaches attracted the news reporters. What he didn't account for was the fact that journalists are people too, and the day the boy was attacked, the day that would have had the beaches shut down, there were journalists out on the beach just enjoying their summer. So the exact thing he wanted took him out in the end. You can't keep your face clean long with blood on your hands. I think that the three main men in the story were written to represent the three general states of mind that men had at the time, varying by age. Hooper, the rich young hippie, college-educated, and having done the bare minimum in his life, described in the novel as the exact kind of person that Brody resents. Brody is the man of middle age, old enough to still feel young, but remembering the number attached to his person knocks the wind out of his sails. Aware of his responsibilities, but still carefree enough to shirk them. Quint was the elderly man, who lived a life that the previously mentioned men would never choose to suffer. He is unafraid of small talk. His shirked responsibilities were never by choice, regrets that have turned into acceptances 100 times over for him. I really wish these versions of the characters could have had their chance in the limelight, because the shallow, hyper-masculine, weenie-measuring versions of them were hard to watch. It was really cringy having read the novel version of Quint solemnly express he was never married, just for the movie version of him to do some mad-eye moody Count Olaf impression about celebrating his third wife's demise. You go from experiencing an older man who has essentially hermetized himself for the perceived good of everyone else around him, whose life isn't a blissfully unaware result of survival and rebellion, but is a cultivated and purposeful existence, close to the end. While Brody and Hooper have their own personal resentments, the relationship between Hooper and Quint is similar between the book and the movie. If Brody and Hooper are on two sides of the same coin, Hooper and Quint are on the same sides of a dollar. In the novel, their fates are shared. In the movie, their roles and motives are different, so Hooper's survival and Quint's death carry different meanings. Brody was never going to die, so that would be out of the question. Hooper's death without all of the tension surrounding his relationships is just an unmotivated loss, and Brody's relationship with him wouldn't be deep enough to constitute the satisfaction of a revenge kill. Quint, however, portrayed as seafaring Rick, delivering lovable one-liners and monologuing about his munched-up buddies like they're pineapple shrimps at Bubba Gump's. His loss is certainly heroic as sad, and we are happy to see the shark get blown up by movie Brody. The trek Hooper and Brody take back to the shore is triumphant and a shared victory, whereas in the story, Brody swims back to shore alone and forever changed by the events that have transpired. Hooper and Quint are in similar businesses but have very different responsibilities. Hooper studies the ocean, while Quint is a part of it. Hooper's privilege to be a man who can study and swim with fish and sharks allows him his knowledge and research as a basis for his worldview and values, yet we see that those are easily tossed aside in the face of real experience. With the feeding frenzy and the porpoise as bait, Hooper argues, "I don't find this amusing or fun or right," to which Quint essentially replies, "Who said that's why I was showing you this?" Brody doesn't take part in these interactions between Hooper and Quint, but feels relieved upon seeing Hooper being put in his place. The frustration Hooper builds up over being talked to in a manner of which he is not accustomed makes him feel righteous in taking it out on Brody. In his world, he's only taught to respect the people he knows are above him, who have earned it. In Brody and Quint's world, respect is the bare minimum for how you treat anybody. That's another example of how theory put into practice can reveal a lot of fallacy. If you're on the side of life where you never have to choke on another person's fart, you'll never understand how little rank or power manipulations matter. When it's life or death on a field in the middle of fuck-buck nowhere, all you will ever know the world as from then on is people who have your back and people who don't. Quint mentions that he never saw the need for a wife. That's not because of some solitary machismo BS. It's because he went from being a kid to a soldier in World War II. It's because he can't gently connect with humanity in the way a woman needs. And that's not some vague machismo BS either. That literally means he is an abusive person, and given the times and his age, the propensity for healing is slim to none. These kinds of men essentially use the facade of a solitary nature to compensate for the fact that they think changing everything they knew and acted like for one person just isn't worth it and is a threat. In fact, they are aggressively regressive and cannot focus on anyone but themselves. They may have been through many things but never evolved past the baby way of dealing with those things. Infants and toddlers need distraction because not only are the problems surrounding them not their responsibility at all, they are incapable of doing anything for themselves. It's truly a shame that these men were shuffled to the back of the necessity pile, there to be picked from like they're extras in a movie. Yet, at the same time, it is a gift. They are aware they weren't given purpose at birth. Some do very well with this, and some inevitably fail. The life they build for themselves from the scraps of what they started out with gives them purpose. For the brave and charismatic, things tend to work out in some fashion. So what keeps you from being truly brave or charismatic? Usually, it's the inability to accept your individual place in life. The truth, regardless, is that these people carry a lot of pain with them. Brody is the essential average Joe. He thinks he's not a bad guy, although insatiably insecure, had a good sense of justice, doesn't want to act on impulse, yet has. He is faced with a lot of his mistakes in the novel. In the movie, he's portrayed as a classic 70s idealized hero, average in looks and stature, but with a heart of gold, a beautiful and attentive wife who only appears when she's wanted, kids who respect him. A lot of the negativity in the novel is cast aside, which is how we all know people of that era were encouraged to act. Even today, that generation of people insist on agreeing to disagree. Nobody can be correct, not even God, because none of them can agree on what they think as a whole. They don't understand or refuse to accept that life is not shallow. These are people who have actually gone through things and are still too afraid to commit to anything real. Their kids are unplanned, their marriages are unattended to, the only motivation towards success being what other people tell them to do, and the idea that if they make enough money, they'll somehow be free. He is hitting his midlife crisis age. He feels too young to reflect like Quint does, but has to accept he's too old to still be acting like Hooper. He only starts to react in a regretful way once confronted with the reality that him not valuing his own principles turned a no-fault freak of nature into a cover-up he was personally responsible for. Being too reactionary is the downfall of many men, Brody included. He is not intentional or purposeful when it really counts until it's too late. He expects to be catered to, complaining when he's not. He is stubbornly unable to praise things even when he actually likes them. He balks at anything he sees as remotely threatening to his dull day-to-day mindset. His wife is the longest sufferer of this treatment besides Brody himself. His resentment of who he sees as the upper class is no secret. The brand Lacoste is one he finds synonymous with those he sees as born perfect. Hooper and his wife Ellen are these types of people who come from that background. It's a world that exists in his sphere that he was ridiculed for trying to enter. The way he and Ellen actually got together was by chance. She had seen him as heroic and handsome, and still does, but as he takes her for granted, so does she for him. Her affair with Hooper very clearly symbolizes the lasting effect of the romanticism of her youth, what she didn't realize she was giving up by marrying Brody, whose inner resentments are very well hidden. What would you say to someone? What would you say someone has or hasn't been taught to do if their reaction to their spouse's disinterest wasn't even blame? It's just how life is with them. They don't genuinely second-guess themselves. He has spent so long of his life dissolving his own interests that when an adult, he has made his wife, has her own desires to stay connected to the things that made her the person he fell in love with. He renders them null and void. He doesn't lead them anywhere, share much with them, or impart much. Ellen is obviously not a good person for purposefully seeking an affair with a younger man. Fact is, this is how most Gen X and Boomer parents acted. This is how they dealt with things. Ignoring negativity and chalking the loss of friends and family up to just how things work out sometimes. They never have to confront anybody, and they never have to think about anything they did wrong. I never did that, and that never happened is usually what we hear as their kids when we try to tell them something happened. In fact, the Brody children exemplify the age-old saying of children should be seen seen and not heard. While that's obviously an extreme and is now commonly used to silence children when they say anything, the positive way of viewing that saying is that it means children don't need to be involved in adult affairs, as in it's not a child's job to fix your adult issues. A child shouldn't be there to overhear his parents' marital or financial issues. They feel a sense of responsibility that's ultimately cruel to them and forces them to grow up quicker than a child should. The Brody children have a minimal role in the novel and the movie, but their appearances and lack thereof signify a lot when it comes to a youth-obsessed culture. While they're depicted as good, obedient, and curious children, we as the reader interact with whom Brody interacts with. Again, the language and detail used in this story is so intentional that, in my opinion, this is how we can tell that Brody doesn't interact much with his children. The fact that his kids are good kids says less about his parenting and more about the fact that when unstable fathers are out of their kids' lives, they do a lot better. This again isn't to say Ellen is mother of the year, but clearly is the parent that is most present in her sons' lives. She has 3 sons and no daughter. She knows their schedule and can answer questions about her children while Brody checks in with them every now and then. As an aside, it's actually good that Ellen never had a daughter, because most women like her, when faced with the loss of their youth in the form of their daughter, actively resent them, actively are jealous of them, and have such a horrible and ruined relationship with them that not only is the mother forever a changed person until they die or ever realize they were doing something wrong, the daughter suffers the rest of her life as well with those memories and that knowledge, no matter what. If Ellen had a daughter before she ever had this realization about her lost youth, she would have definitely taken out her feelings on that child. There are several reasons we can logically attribute to Brody's physical and emotional absence. His career as a police chief is already a large reason, even though it wasn't as understood or accepted back then. The police have very poor mental health support, similar to the military. Seeking the help you need ends up with more negative consequences than you will have support to deal with. It could mean forfeiting your career, and they don't offer you backups or aid in transitioning to the new reality you need in order to keep sane. It all becomes your problem to deal with. That society chastises you for not being able to handle on your own. It's unrealistic and obviously hardly sustainable. Then there's the realization that most people never seem to have until they're forced to. Other people existing isn't a threat to you, and you are in fact obliged towards them. Unfortunately, the realization usually comes by having a child, whom they essentially see as a silent extension of themselves, eventually rejecting them when they get a voice of their own. Pure, untapped narcissism affects children the worst because they haven't had a chance to know anything else. And if they never seek healing, will eventually take on the narcissistic traits in order to avoid abandonment. Brody acts like a child, which is woman code for abusive, because we know we can't even say that without getting abused. I really wonder what the idea of masculinity would look like if this version was portrayed. This is the story of a man becoming emotionally aware before it's too late. Hooper represents a genre of man very specific in this era. The counterculture good guy, America's first step towards defining liberal ideology. He is college educated. His experience with the ocean has only been positive. Let me read his description from the dinner party. At 7:05, the doorbell rang, and Brody answered it. He was wearing a blue madras shirt, blue uniform slacks, and black cordovans. He felt crisp and clean. Spiffy, Ellen had said. But when he opened the door for Hooper, he felt, if not rumpled, at least outclassed. Hooper wore bell-bottom blue jeans, Ouija loafers with no socks, and a red Lacoste shirt with an alligator on the breast. It was the uniform of the young and rich in Amity. I mentioned before how the brand Lacoste is very socially relevant at this time. Let me read you Brody's experience. In his adolescence, Brody had thought of those shirts as badges of wealth and position. All the summer people wore them. Brody badgered his mother until she bought him one. A $2 $5 shirt with a $6 lizard on it, she said. And when he didn't find himself suddenly wooed by the gaggles of summer people, he was humiliated. He tore the alligator off the pocket and used the shirt as a rag to clean the lawnmower with which he earned his summer income. Brody is not only jealous of Hooper, but he resents him. Hooper is the kid brother of someone Ellen used to date. Now an adult working in oceanography, his only reason for being on the island is the shark. He has a very matter-of-fact and straightforward nature. He has no reason not to be confident, nor even presumes how he speaks to a married woman would be inappropriate. While this trait is fetishized by men and women alike, it's also seen as a threat to those who have spent their life diminishing themselves, who don't act positively with passion, who are actually very angry on the inside, because he isn't acting with ulterior motives, and because the people around him have been starved of authentic interaction, he is effectively used, gobbled up by the same enabled naivete he never had a reason to grow out of. He is an emotionally aware person, but still without purpose. Yes, he has a career, but since when has career reflected purpose with the personal intention and dedication towards a goal? His achievements might sound amazing to people who live on an island, but to the developed world he intends to be a part of, he's still a baby. Quint isn't resentful of Hooper, he stands as the mirror to him. He isn't in the role of a mentor that is babying and enabling him. He calls him out and challenges him. Quint was in the Marine Corps. He has lived a life where his needs and desires had to be put to the very back burner in order to achieve a mission greater than himself. He decided long ago, whenever it was he was released from the Corps, to be his own man. This meant shedding anything out of his control. For him, he had never known a life of calm, where he can trust another soul. That's not masculinity. That's unresolved mental issues. When you come across someone who has that kind of edge to them, that's just PTSD. The trick is always that these types of issues are not something you can fix on your own, especially not by following a manual or by trial and error. Pretending otherwise really diminishes your self-worth over time. It becomes easy to tough guy it out when you can sequester yourself and keep your mind busy, and if you don't have much drive or passion beyond that. But the truth is that they're avoiding any situation that can leave them vulnerable, for fear of attack, or for the fear that what they might do to someone who didn't really deserve it. Quint and Hooper avoid commitment for the same reasons. They know they would hurt whoever they were with. Hooper's affair and his death represent folly of youth. He is purposeless, floating along and saying yes to the opportunities that come up. His idea of consequences barely exists. His death has no real meaning except to the people who fetishized him. It's not a bad way to be, but it's a real sign of being sheltered at his age to be that naive. Good people who have been sheltered for their crucial developmental years have a higher risk of getting involved in abusive relationships or drawn into doing things they may not have done normally. Whoever was sheltering them either did it for what they believed was the child's own good, or they neglected the child consciously or unconsciously. Regardless of intention, the outcome remains the same. To an extent, I believe this also correlates with the death of passion in an individual. While most have stated this is growing up, it's the opposite of maturing. Letting your passion die, letting your inner peace and desire be extinguished by so many means, is not any individual's fault of their own, especially when it's been taught to us as something else. But just because you were neglected absolutely is not a death sentence. Just because you were left on your own does not mean that's where you were meant to be. Your existence and your death is never meant to serve the purpose of another. You are not a living sacrifice. We are here to celebrate one another. We work together to give the ones we love their flowers. That's not fate. That's not orchestrated. That is purposeful and intentional. All three of these men suffer from an issue we see most people regardless suffering with now. They were never taught how to treat people. They were never taught how to slow down and treat themselves. I believe the author pulled from himself and people he knew to build these characters. Leonard Hendricks is a young man who served in Vietnam and came back to Amity Island to work as a policeman under Chief Brody. He is the fourth man, and although he doesn't play as obvious a role as Brody, Hooper, or Quint, he is one of the only characters of which we see through their eyes. He represents the model man, although in the movie he was made to come come off as an airhead. He has the most personal interaction with the shark until the 3 other men head out on the boat. He is the officer on duty who takes the initial missing persons call. He finds the body of the woman. He is inches from the fish when it attacks and kills the elderly man, pulling the man's parts from the water. He sails Brody out to investigate what's going on with Ben Gardner's fishing boat and is the one to find the shark's tooth. He gives the shark tooth to Brody. He isn't directly on the scene when the shark chases the teenager, but is second in command on that mission. Hendricks checks in and out with him through the day and follows Brody's orders. Although he's not present during the actual hunt for the shark, Brody takes a copy of one of his favorite novels to read and remembers his words to help him survive during the final confrontation. I believe Brody and Hendricks are each other's mirrors, each other's foils. He is effectively Brody's deputy. They complement each other in a very respectful way and grow off one another. It's good we see through his eyes and hear his thoughts independently, because otherwise it would be easy to assume he is a flat, corruptible character. Although it's not stated exactly which branch he served in, we can assume the Marines like Quint, since he was a radio operator. Hendricks is brave enough to be vulnerable, plain, and straightforward. For a man to be so in tune with himself and considerate of others while coming off the heels of one of the worst wars in history truly is special. Another theme I noticed in this book was the idea of imagination versus reality, and we find this strongly represented in the form of the media. The character Harry Meadows is the editor-in-chief of the town paper, and his relationship with the police, the town, and with the rest of the world is utilized prominently. One complaint you'll hear about the media in today's era is that you can't trust them. Fake news is a reiteration of old conservative propaganda that stems from the issue we've been discussing, intention and self-awareness. You will find that a lot of people, regardless of politics, do not act with self-awareness or intention. They, in fact, have been taught to believe that any form of acknowledging someone else and putting focus on them in an open way is a threat to their own existence. They may not even be aware that they're acting as if they're better than everyone else. It's interesting when women are generally called manipulative when the seed of truth is that we have been taught to consider others to the point of self-deprivation. It's interesting to hear the media generally called manipulative when in fact journalism doesn't come to truth or lies. It's a matter of fact versus opinion. This may sound like the same thing, but I see intention as the difference. Facts are seen as innocent until proven guilty. I have known people who legitimately don't believe in air. The truth is non-negotiable, and when a real truth is heard, most people feel it settle in their souls. People can have opinions about the truth and about facts. These come from a wide array of emotions. A lie is an intentionally deceptive statement that has motive, where an opinion is mostly impulsive. A lot of content portrayed as news is in fact opinion. A lot of stuff portrayed as dismissible opinion is in fact news. And the only way to know for sure is in the future, when we can look back at the past and what we've gathered from the fragments of that event. It's almost impossible for an average person to recall an event without bias, even if they were there. It takes a very strong sense of self-awareness, observation, and non-biased judgment to accurately remember how exactly things went in the past during an event you were present for. Where some people see lies and slander, what exists is intention. Manipulation can be seen as good or bad, and it's a sticky trap that good people fall into when they believe taking any intentional action is manipulation. They fall into a black hole of themselves, where they never actually learn the difference between right and wrong when it's staring them directly in the face. We have been trained to ignore our instincts instead of learning to properly apply them to our individual situations. It doesn't matter how flat a cell phone can be or how high your car can hover if the instinct to make use of or stay away from those things is offset. This line of thinking is exactly where the moon landing conspiracy comes from. It's where a lot of emotional manipulation comes from. In this novel, it proves a point that the people pointing at the media for reporting the truth are the same ones comfortably living a lie in their own home. Was it taken out of context, or is it something of which your true intention was revealed? We see this happen multiple times through the book. Between the mayor's relationship with the mafia and Brody's emotional shortcomings, the deeds covered up are very obvious obvious to anyone who's paying attention. I personally think that being a true reporter is very respectable. It's much like being a detective. Do you know how many times in the past that murders and plots have occurred, and how many millions of people with the knowledge of these crimes occurring have just let it wash over them? The type of person who pays attention enough to know something is hiding below the surface, sees a dead or dying person and figures out that something otherwise unseen has occurred is incredible. Being a journalist or a detective requires a certain level of perception and self-awareness to be effective. What we see an example of with the TV news crew is the intersection of news and reality TV. They are opposed to scripting a scene, but will ask for redos if something happens. They don't want to and can't tell someone what to do, how to do it, but it's acceptable to encourage certain actions or enable behaviors as long as everyone involved agrees to it. Reality is news. That's a fact. This type of sensationalism relies on opinion being viewed as fact. People scramble to have the pleasure of being the first one to spread news. I really don't think that's a bad thing. What the issue regards takes us back to the point previously stated. Facts versus opinions. I'm not sure if this still occurs in schools, but when I was in elementary school, maybe once every week or so, they'd have us find a few articles, read them, answer questions about them, and analyze them. I see so many people misread headlines through a personal bias to the point where the entire story gets misrepresented. People are acting too much out of a negative impulse and not their positive ones, which leads us to the final theme I'll discuss in this video. What disappointed me was when I was looking for online discussion of the Jaws book, I found a lot of voices expressing they felt the book was so racist, sexist, homophobic, and I found that opinion so trite and shallow. Through which lens did you read the book? The one where if black people are mentioned at all, it's racist? In this book, I found a central character that is specifically a lesbian, who is written well and is an accepted member of this community. I found descriptions of black experience in the 70s written plainly, where a member of the community represents the black and Mexican folk in important city meetings. His voice is heard as an equal. I found a deep characterization of the average unhappily married woman who does not serve as a plot device to further the main male character's story, but has her own personality and plight, which she resolves through her own independent experiences. And the reaction I saw towards this book alone supports my conviction that this book is about the fear of the average white American man, how it impulses him, how it controls him, regardless of political alignment, regardless of intention, the outcome being the same, if not worse, than if they acted out of pure hate and anger. At first, I thought the shark represented fear of women. This thought really settled in after reading Quint say he never saw the need for a wife. When Ellen's story wrapped up and I realized how purposeful the author was with detail, I began to realize the shark represented fear, period. Fear of women, fear of man, fear of self, fear of God, fear of it all. And from there, I began to see so much more. Truly, it's from this realization that the rest of the themes became so apparent to me. The novel purposefully takes away the fear from what was, and is commonly blamed for social upheaval, race, sex, gender, and sexual preference. What happens in a society where all of that seems to be accepted and encouraged healthily? Corruption still happens, death still happens, and good people still get hurt. There is a line that stuck with me: survive only by moving. We see so many people we would consider predatory. These people act out of sheer impulse, and this is something I've known for quite a long time. And the sense of fear it strikes in my stomach when I think of the reality. Not a lot of people think about their actions. It's a shame the ones who do are subjected to so much guilt and shame. This is why we build prisons and sentence people to time out at a daycare. This is why I see a lot of people as sociopathic. The excuses and enabling people provide for each other over the most horrid of things is like giving permission for those things to happen over and over and over again. Sharks do not act upon anything besides electrical currents in the impulse to feed. If it stops, it dies. A human driven basically by impulse in this culture is terrifying to me. In this culture, following good impulses is discouraged. People stifle their impulses but allow themselves to indulge in the ones they feel are okay. I see it as a symptom of neglect. The overall theme of the book is the imagination of fear and the confrontation of it in a healthy way. This book wasn't written by a racist, sexist, homophobic man. This was written by a very worldly man as his first novel after spending more than 30 years experiencing life, learning, and listening. He died a respected man. Brody begins to act on his positive impulses. It took an affair for him and his wife to reflect on all these years they've wasted playing childish one-upping games of petty revenge. But he sees his family in a deeper tone. He doesn't follow through on checking Hooper's story. He impulsively checks on his boys. His desire for negative impulse died with Hooper upon realizing that whether or not the truth was ever to be stated to his face, he had to learn to decide something and intentionally act as a grown man. The description of the nightmares he has and that are soon to come, the ones we can imagine he will have after watching Quint sink with the shark, cement this reality to me. We can imagine he succumbs to alcoholism, but I feel that the respect and responsibility he has, the way his wife and children and the town will need him. In my head, I see him taking the place of mayor and having Hendrix take the place of chief. While I'm not being sponsored by Books A Million, I'd really be remiss if I chose not to inform you guys about their special edition copy celebrating the 50th anniversary of the novel's publication. While in store, it's about $29 with tax. If you order it online, it's listed for about $18. This novel is one of my favorites now, and I highly recommend it.